welcome everyone for attending our meeting tonight. There is a sign-in sheet that is being circulated. Just make sure you get your names on the sign-in sheet so we have an accurate record of the people that have attended the meeting.
Silence.
I believe that we are.
How's that one? Is that better? Can everybody hear me now? This thing is right in my face like that. The first item on our agenda is to approve our minutes from the March 22nd meeting.
Make a motion to approve the March 22nd, 2023 meeting minutes.
Second.
Lee is the motion and Peter's the second. Anybody have any changes, corrections, omissions, errors, anything on the minutes?
I just have a couple of typos that I noted. Page 1, line 19. The first word on that line is irrelevant. It says Ariana was seconded the motion. And then on page 4, line 13, I think there's a typo there. Jim Wells thought a hydro hammer was never intended. I think it should be hydraulic hammer. That was all I had.
Anybody else have anything? Any other corrections? Nope. All those in favor of approving the minutes as amended, please say aye.
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 And I'd just like to point out that one of our board members is with us on Zoom, Heather Chase. She's still up at the Capitol, and I think they're pretty busy this time of year up there, but she's with us on Zoom tonight. Next item is citizens' comments. If there's someone here that would like to address the board regarding an issue that is not on the agenda, now would be the time to do so. Are there any citizens' comments? Just come on up and state your name and give us your
My
comment.
name is Jerry Gleason. I live up on Flamstead Road. I'm basically here to follow up on our meeting on 3-1 concerning hazardous waste moving through town by rail. There were some follow-up items that I believe the board was going to look at. We're going to look into further identifying the material that does travel through town, if that was possible. We were going to follow up with the state as far as inspections that are being performed here in town on the rails. And basically, we're looking for the reports and if there's any corrective actions involved. And lastly, we were going to pursue any reports that were available concerning the East Palestine incident and any lessons learned that we could take away from that. So I was just wondering where we were and if we were pursuing those items.
There were some communications that we had with, I think it was the railroad and a few other entities, also with the state.
Mm-hmm.
Some of those items were answered. They talked about the conditions of the rails and that fact that they're inspected and the reports are there and they have all that available. They spoke of the cargo that they carry, and for some reason they're not allowed to disclose it because of competition. I don't get how that works, who's competing with the railroad to carry these things, because there's only one railroad. But that was part of the comment that they gave regarding the cargo. They also did state that all the agencies in town and in the area around here are always trained for hazmat spills, railroad incidences, or any type of disaster or accident that might be happen.
Personally, I don't really think we're going to get too far with them as far as identifying if they don't want to release that information. But what I do think that we can pursue is looking at those reports and seeing if there are things that need correcting. And as I mentioned at that 3-1 meeting, the town can push back and make sure that those things are taken care of. And of course, lastly, if we're able to pursue anything from this East Palestine incident, and I don't know how much is available through the EPA and all of that sort of thing, but I do think it would be worthwhile, especially considering how close the rail is to the river and our well.
We could share those emails with Jerry, I would think, no?
It was,
Arnie?
it was verbal conversations. And my fire chief did request copies of those inspections. We haven't seen them to date, so I will ask Matt to follow up.
Okay.
But the communication we had was verbal.
Okay.
Well, Arnie,
Go ahead, Heather.
I also have some emails that I think I forwarded to you,
Yeah.
but perhaps if we have this as an agenda item for the next meeting, we could, I can't remember everything in the email, but maybe we could break some of that down.
Yeah, Heather, thank you for that, because that's where the email originated.
I haven't seen them, so if you could forward them to me, Heather, that would be great, and then I can
Okay,
make sure
but
that's on the
if we
agenda.
could,
Even if Heather was able to provide that to you, and as a follow-up in the minutes that are published, if, it's a great way of communicating it. So, rather than,
and by the way, I did not find out anything about the Ohio incident, but I did find out some things about Vermont and things about what they've done here. So I can share that with Julie. I shared it with Arnie. Julie, it was my oversight in not forwarding it to you. I'll include you. And if you guys want to, I'm more than happy to pursue other, after you read it, if you want me to pursue something, I'm happy to do that.
Yeah, I think it'd be worthwhile to follow up on. It seems like trains are coming off the tracks all over the place.
right, you're seeing
just
more
a-
and more of it, and the number of incidences you're hearing about, which is staggering across the United States, you know, so, thank you.
Thank you, Jerry. Anybody else for citizens' comments? Now, is that cursor in white on Scott Blair, or is that yellow?
That's the cursor.
Okay,
That's cursor.
thank you. So he doesn't have his hand
He
up.
does not have his hand up.
It doesn't matter if I use my glasses
It's
or
okay.
not.
Kathy's going to move it.
Thanks, Kath. I look up there, I see a hand every time. Hearing no more citizens' comments, we'll move on to old business. And Julie, can you take us to our old business list?
I can. The solar field, I did hear back from Greenbacker. Lee and I were supposed to have a meeting this Friday, but they have moved it. So we have a meeting next Tuesday, the 11th, so I will have an update, a good update on the 19th, after we've had that meeting.
So they scheduled another meeting? Because what he had just said is they had canceled the one you were going to have?
Yeah.
And it's been rescheduled for
Oh,
Tuesday.
okay.
Yeah.
We were supposed to meet Friday morning, and Lee did some schedule shifting to get that, and now they canceled. So we're meeting them on Tuesday. The quarry that was discussed last week, Preston did a determination, wrote a draft determination of local zoning that kind of matches the jurisdictional opinion. Him and I have a meeting before that document goes public, him and I have a meeting with the town attorney, Jim, who is out of the office this week. We will be meeting with him on Tuesday morning to go over that. Jim has been sent all the documentation. We'll have a good discussion on the town's role and next steps for us. So you'll have more again on the 19th for that. And as soon as he gives me the okay on the determination, I will get you guys a copy of that. The community garden, follow up to that. I met with members of the community garden. Arnie was there as well. I emailed you guys the latest version of the memorandum of understanding. I had let you know we would do that. I expect that it will be signed soon. We had a good discussion, and I think we've reached a point that we're in agreement. The new Citizens Advisory Committee, the first meeting has now been set up. First meeting will be April 18th at 7 p.m., and that meeting will be at the Public Safety Building. It will obviously have an agenda and is open to the public, but that will be their first meeting. And then just for informational purposes, we did receive our first 2 notifications of, one, a manufacturing Tier 2 cannabis permit and a mixed cultivation Tier 2 permit that were issued to Fern Gully Farm on Route 11 East. No action needed from us. It's just informational for the select board and the town that those 2 permits have now been issued for Chester. I believe there's something retail coming, but it has not hit us yet.
So there's 4 tiers on their permits and stuff, and they go by size?
Correct.
And I'm looking your way,
Yeah,
Ariana.
Yeah, no, that's-
Tier-
please.
Yes, yes.
So is Tier 2 the lower one, or is it?
Tier 2 is smaller. Yeah, these are small licenses, and I'm going to use some broad references. These are not very specific, but in most states, people are growing like 10,000 square feet of plant. Here, people are growing 1,000 square feet of plant. So our tiers, even our highest tier, is lower than many states' lowest tier. So Tier 2, conceptually, would be smaller growing space than we have in this room, less space for plants than we have in this room. And it's mixed cultivator, these licenses, which means they can grow some inside and some outside, but that also means it limits the overall quantity because they can do both. So that's a sense of what they're getting ready to do. It's a small, it's a new small business here in Chester, is the way to think of it.
Thanks for that information.
That's it for me, for old business.
Any board members have any old business?
I have none.
No, I don't have any.
Not at this time.
All right, the next item on our agenda is a discussion with the neighbors of West Chester and the Potash Brook area. There's been a lot of concern about some of the incidences that have been happening in that area, and I guess it's been a situation that's been going on for years, and it's escalated over the years, and it's calmed down for a bit, but lately it's escalated a lot. The concerns we have as a board, even though we're kind of limited in what we could do for action and stuff, is for the safety of the community and the safety of the neighborhoods and how it affects all the people that live there. And also for the person that's involved in this and his welfare and stuff and what could be done for that. It's to provide a forum for you folks here that are here for this part of the meeting to speak up and tell us the situations that you're living through or what's going on, and to have a forum for us to discuss and talk about it and stuff. So I would welcome anyone that would like to talk about this situation to come forward and do so.
Hi, good evening. I'm Sean Snyder
Thanks, Sean.
from 674 Potash Brook Road. I guess the longevity of things, maybe my property has been the most affected over the most years. I'm not sure. Since we've all gotten together, there's been more and more information coming out. And I don't know if I can actually talk about specific things, just the legality of things, but my home, at least most recent, has been broke into multiple times, vandalized. I've had multiple things stolen. There's still things missing. And it has gotten so bad up there. There's been so many instances of thefts and trespasses. I've got a no trespass order on an individual, my neighbor. I've got this gentleman on camera multiple times, actually stealing my camera equipment, and he has mental issues, and a lot of this stuff is getting pushed off as he has mental issues instead of dealing with the crimes that are being committed. And that is very, very frustrating for me and the community up there. I know that a lot of us are seeking that he actually get the help he needs. That I do wish he would get. We're constantly living in fear. I rarely reside up there, and when we go up there, I've actually gone up there after I've picked up my young children, and they have begged me in the truck not to go up there anymore. They do not feel safe. My son, who's an outdoors kid, one of my sons, an outdoors kid, will not go outside up there anymore. And there are a lot of aspects to this gentleman up there, the neighbor at 624, and he does need help. I know we're pushing for some sort of mental reform in the state and all kinds of stuff. We hope he gets the help, but he is a direct threat, and people feel threatened and not safe. So that's kind of what I have to say, I guess.
Thank you, Sean.
Thank you, Sean.
Mr. Roper, you have your hand up?
Yes, thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
So, I guess we're going from the victim with the longest history with Mr. Griffin to us who are his newest victims. He seems to expand his area that he's terrorizing a neighborhood. And I don't use that word lightly. People here are afraid. And personally, I don't mind sharing some detail. He walked into our home at 4:35 a.m. I woke from a deep sleep and found him standing inside my front door. That's a little unsettling, obviously. Luckily, I was able to loudly command him to leave, and after the third time he did, he turned around and went out the door. And I watched him go down the driveway, and I thought, okay, good. Unbeknown to me, he went right across the street and went to our neighbor's house 10 minutes later. I also want to reiterate what Sean said about, I don't speak for everybody, but I think the consensus, I think I'm safe in saying there's a consensus in the neighborhood that not only do we want to be safe, we would like for Mr. Griffin to get the care that he needs. He's diagnosed with schizophrenia. He lives alone in a questionable housing situation as far as being sanitary, or it's not sanitary from what I understand. And the problem is that this has been going on, and as Sean said, we hear that word revolving door. Well, the system wants, I think the system means well. It wants to help Mr. Griffin. I think I'm projecting here a little bit that the ideal would be to have someone who's has mental illness to be able to live independently. And I think that's a great goal. In this case, he has proven time and time again that once he's out of supervised care, he stops taking his medications. And before long, he becomes criminally inappropriate. So I know there's some older folks. I know I look old, but there are some older folks even who I'm sure that they're frightened. I've heard stories of people having bear spray handy. So my ask is that we pressure or find some path. Pressure may not even be the right word. Just find some path where folks like Mr. Griffin can get residential care, because he's demonstrated that he's incapable of living on his own without reverting to criminal and frightening behavior. Threatening. He's also threatened people's lives. I've been in touch with the prosecutor's office, as have many other of the citizens here. And, there seems to be we've gotten some focus on this at the state attorney's office. in White River Junction. And we're hoping that that will lead to long-term residential care. So again, my ask is that the legislature or the mental health department or a combination, and the courts somehow figure out a way to manage folks like this who just can't make it living on their own socially in a way that works for the community. And if that doesn't happen, I'm afraid that either Mr. Griffin will become violent, since he's already making threats and showing passive aggressiveness, knocking cameras off the wall with an axe and ripping a storm door open at one point I read about. And or he's going to walk into the wrong house and he's going to come to harm. And I wouldn't want to see that either. So, and imagine what happens then. There's going to be, I don't know if he has family or not, but there're going to be lawsuits. It's going to get ugly. So let's just please try to find a solution. The Chester PD has done, I think, all that they can based upon what they're being told. So I'm not sure where to go next. We're asking for help. That's all I have right now.
Thank you, Mr. Roper. And I probably should have mentioned this in the beginning of this discussion, that with us tonight is the Agency of Human Services. Sue Graft is here, and she's listening in on what's going on. And also the Commissioner of the Department of Mental Health is online, Emily Daves. So she's also listening in to hearing what's going on in our town and what's happening. So just for a reference point, so people realize that there are some people that are listening and are interested to see what's happening here and what's going on and want to hear your story. Is there anyone else that would like to speak?
Could I just say one more thing? Sorry. It's Tim again. Could I just say one more thing?
Yeah, go ahead, Tim. I'm sorry. Just hanging a second.
I'm sorry. I couldn't see somebody was stepping up to the microphone.
Go ahead, Mr. Roper.
No, I've lost my train of thought. My apologies. Go ahead. Whoever.
Go ahead, ma'am. Just give us your name.
I'd like to make this short and sweet, I think.
Your name?
My name is Patricia Snyder, and I'm Sean's mother. And I would just like to point out what this has been, years of this. And it has been very upsetting to our family and naturally to Sean's. I mean, it's not just to his family. It's got to the point where his little boys that were burned there in that house, they're scared to go up there and play in the field if that man is there. That is a shame. And I just want to let you know, Sean has given up kind of getting any help because he feels that more he says that nothing's going to happen. And it's a shame that he can't use his home. He can't sell it. He can't rent it because that man is there. He tried showing him the house one time, and this man came out and made a big scene, screaming and yelling, and this person said, "Does he always do that?" Yep. And that was big money that Sean lost, if he would, and we would just like to see something done. We want this man to have the help that he needs, but we just feel that he gets put in some facility, they get him straightened out, and he goes back home to do the same thing again because he's off his medication. We just feel that maybe he should have someone that is with him at all times to control the situation. We're afraid that somebody is going to get hurt, possibly him. It's a dangerous situation now. And they have stole so much out of Sean's house. It's a shame. It's a shame. I hope something can be done.
Thank you for sharing that, ma'am.
I don't know who it is, but you have a hand.
I can't see.
I can't see who it is, but,
Excuse me, Emily Hawes has her
okay.
hand raised.
It's Commissioner Does.
She has her hand
Yes,
up.
yeah.
Commissioner Dawes, you have your hand up. Would you like to speak?
Sure. It's Haas with an H.
Sorry.
No, that's okay. I also in between some eyeglass prescription, so I very rarely can see what's happening in front of me when it's written. So I know that we were asked to come this evening, and I greatly appreciate folks talking about the experiences that they're currently having and have their neighbors being impacted, property being impacted. And so I don't know if it would be helpful to talk now about the department and, just some overall process information. You're right, we can't talk specifically about a case. I'm happy to continue listening if that's where we're at in the agenda, or I'm also happy to kind of talk about some of the legislative priorities that we have that I hope make an impact for communities, and more specifically those folks who are stuck navigating the criminal justice and mental health system. I can do that now or later, whatever makes sense to the board.
Well, thank you, Commissioner Hawes. At this point, I would just would offer the people that are here a chance to speak and talk about the subject and what's going on. What's happening at the legislative tier at Montpelier and stuff, it's a little discouraging for the folks in the room here and myself, because that's something in the future where we have an immediate problem here that's tearing a neighborhood apart and wreaking havoc on a lot of people's lives where they can't even enjoy the use of their own house. I appreciate that you're here with us and you are listening in, but I feel like these people deserve some kind of help, some kind of answer, and hopefully it would come sooner than later so they can continue their lives. And also, like some of the other people were saying, help for this person. It's obvious that he also needs a lot of help. And it's not like this community wasn't welcoming. I've read a stack of stories that were handed to us about what's happening in that neighborhood, and people reaching out to him and driving him into town to help with groceries and helping him with some costs and stuff. It's not like the neighborhood was just disregarding him and throwing him aside. They tried to help as much as they could in the beginning and do what they could. But because of the way it escalated and what happened, and for whatever reasons, the subject it's gone really bad. So it's just, I just wanted to point out that the people there did their best to what they could, and now it seems like the system is not providing help for the community or for the person that has these issues and stuff. And I could not imagine living in an area like that, that you had a fear for your safety or fear to have your kids out in the yard, or even drive down the road and have the subject in the middle of the road, barely dressed, flagging you down and stomping them and stuff. And our police department has done what they could. They go through the steps, they go through the motions, they do the arrest or do what they have to, but there's no answer. It just keeps coming back and it's just getting worse. Something has to be done. I don't know what the answer is and stuff, and I would hope that there's people in authority that have some kind of say in matters like this that could make something happen. And I still would love to hear if there's somebody else that would like to speak to this issue from the audience here.
My name's Mary Jane Miles, and I do live on Potash Brook Road, and I live just over a mile on the other end of the road down near the end. And I have to say that Ashley does not just confine his issues to a small area of the road. You mentioned, which is actually exactly my situation, is I was driving down the road after work one evening. It was in January when we had that early mud season. And he ran out in front of my car, and the road was a disaster, and I had to swerve around him. And he's lucky I didn't hit him. He was screaming and yelling, and that happens to be the same night that we believe he went up Christmas Tree Farm Road and entered another individual's house. And I did call the police. They said that was illegal for him. I did an affidavit. They went looking for him. They spent 2 hours looking for him because one of the other neighbors saw him walking down the road. They could not find him at that time. I mean, there's nothing more fearful on a dark road at night, having this crazy screaming person running out in front of your car. My son, on one of the coldest days in January, witnessed him naked at his mailbox, no shoes, no clothes. We called to ask to do a welfare check. It was brutally cold. I know it's not illegal to be naked if you leave your house. But my son is 17 years old, my daughter is 16. It's not what I want my children to see, and it was a brutally cold day. I mean, clearly, you are not thinking clearly at that moment if you're outside like that, checking your mail. I live a mile down the road. I'm now locking my doors. I have cameras. There's another person in our neighborhood who has a restraining order and truly has PTSD and literally will text me on a regular basis to tell me what his whereabouts are at any given time. I mean, he stares out his window. This is not what I want in my neighborhood. This is not how I want to feel. I don't want this guy walking in my house at night with my kids home, being completely doing what he thinks he should do. And it's not that he doesn't understand right from wrong, because when he doesn't show up to court, he calls the police department and lets them know to come get him because he's expecting a bench warrant for not showing up to court. So there is a process of knowing right from wrong. And I'm a nurse. I work in behavioral health. I work in Rutland. Let me tell you, it's 20-fold as bad in that city right now. It's like I've never seen Rutland, having worked there 25 years ago compared to now. It's absolute lawlessness. And so it just shows you on a grander scale how poor mental health is being managed. Because I know plenty of people with mental health issues who have families who work every day and do just a fine job, and they struggle nonetheless. But it doesn't mean you don't know right from wrong and you don't have a get-out-of-jail card. I am considering selling my house and getting out of that neighborhood. I don't, and he's a mile plus down the road. I used to walk the streets all the time. I have neighbors who walk by that house, and I'm nervous for them. I am, because we are fearful, because he does have a history of not just verbal abuse. I know history of him way back when, before this all came out, where he would kick a woman's dog. I mean, this guy has got a criminal element to him, and it is dangerous, and I don't want him in my home. And I don't want to be told when he doesn't show up for court, we'll give you another chance to come, because that's my home. And I can't imagine at 4:30 in the morning having a man in your house who doesn't belong there. And it's not that to say you should have your doors locked. You're in your home. You shouldn't have to have your doors locked. That's not the point here. The point is, people should have the right to be safe in their home. And I do agree, the police have done as much as they can. They've tried issuing citations to keep his volatility down, because when you arrest him, he freaks out. I mean, he's had 2 home invasions, and he assaulted a healthcare worker in Springfield Hospital. I do think that's 3 felonies in probably 30 days' time. And so he'll be released eventually. And when will the consequences for the actions so that we can feel safe happen? I've worked as a nurse for 31 years. I mean, I don't know it all, but I'm telling you that the state of mental health care in this state is absolutely atrocious. It does not serve the need. And I know many, many years ago, we took people out of institutionalization. I worked in Boston for 20 of those years, and when that happened and mass mental health closed, all those people were living in cardboard boxes on the streets. So we thought, and I get there were abuses, and we thought we were doing the right thing, but why do we have to go to such extremes? Why can't we go somewhere in the middle? Because there are people who need to be in a cared facility and supervised, and then there are those who do not and do well with great support. There's just no support. I work with Rutland Mental Health all the time, and they can't help it. They don't have the staff. They don't have the funds. But from my perspective in this neighborhood, I am fearful. My children are, I shouldn't have to say them all the time, I live on the end of a dirt road. We all have like 10 acres around us. We don't see our neighbors, but we all know each other. And I've got to tell my kids, lock the door at night, make sure that this is done, make sure that's done. And I do worry about I am angry about being in this situation and being unsafe, but I also do worry about his welfare. Because one day he's going to go into a situation he may not make it out of, because people are afraid. People are having PTSD over this and are genuinely afraid. And I feel that needs to be understood very loud and clear. And I was grateful that we all came, 16 of us came to meet with Julie and Tom Williams and had a great conversation. I don't know that happens in many towns. I don't think that does. So I'm very grateful for that. And it was a thought process to come here before the board because we wanted it on record. We wanted it on record. This has been going on for years, and his house is truly deplorable. He has garbage, and he's on the brook, and his garbage flows into the brook. And what do you do about it? Like, you give your citation, you tell him he's got to clean it up, but there's no teeth in anything in terms of making something better. And we live in that environment. And Sean his next-door neighbor has had to deal with this for years. Years. He can't sell his home. Who would buy a house with a guy running out, screaming and yelling that he's the devil? Or just screaming and yelling he's a jerk? Or expecting somebody to come and cut a tree he doesn't like, so he slowly cuts it so it's going to fall into the road and maybe injure somebody. This is the things that have been going on for years. It's not a subject we don't know about in our neighborhood, but it definitely, there is a sense of fear. And my concern is, what does that mean to us? Because you got to protect people who have these issues, but we deserve that as well. So I appreciate you listening to me, and I want you to understand how grave this situation is for all of us when we got 16 people to come down here and talk about it. And there are more who couldn't be here tonight, but certainly have had terrible experiences. So I appreciate your time.
Thank you. Thank you, Mary Jane.
Thank you.
Tim Roper has his hand back up.
Tim Roper. Mr. Roper, you have your hand back up?
Yes, sorry about that. I just wanted to, and you already did this, Arnie, called attention to the letters from the neighbors. And I would just hope, since they are part of the packet, that other folks involved in looking at policy and seeing if there are things that could be done to better manage the situation would also read those letters, because I think they tell a really true story of not only the issues here, but of the attitude of the neighbors. So I just wanted to add that. Thank you.
Thank you, Tim. Is there anyone else here that would like to speak?
Gladys Collins, Potash Brook Road. I have two questions. One, I wondered, Arnie, if we could read a couple of those letters from folks that aren't here. Is that possible? They have very compelling stories. I could name who they are, the ones that I thought. Maybe there are other people that thought others were compelling, but can I name names? Sure. Since they're part of the packet. I thought Daryl Martins and Carol Theodore had really compelling letters, and they weren't able to be here tonight.
James and Gladys Collins, that's you. I got that one there. Carol?
Yeah, you don't need to
Carol
read
Theodore.
ours. Carol and Daryl Martins had very compelling stories. And then my other question, is there anything that the select board can do collectively to, kind of put pressure on the system or the town, knowing that it impacts our town and our communities?
I don't know the answer to that.
Okay.
I don't think we have much say in the matter as far as mental health goes and stuff. I'm not sure. Maybe later on. Sue, I don't want to put you on the spot. Sue Graft, maybe she could speak to that later on. She's with the Agency of Human Services and stuff. I don't know legally what that we can do as a town. I mean, we enforce laws and do that part of it, but as far as the mental health part, I don't know.
I think this is where Commissioner Hawes
Okay.
and
All right. Yeah.
Sue
Thank
would
you.
have some input.
Thank you.
Yeah.
But it's just, a thought that, we can do as much as we can as individuals and even collectively as a community out on the Potash Brook Road and west the Andover Road. However, I think there is power in local government getting involved as well.
Yep.
That's it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Arnie?
Go ahead, Arlen.
I had one question. Mr. Roper mentioned an agency, he said in White River Junction, that he had been in touch with, and I was curious what agency that was and if that was related to Commissioner Hawes. Tim, who did you say you spoke to, and you said in White River?
It was the state's attorney's office, victim advocate, as well as the assistant prosecutor that's handled Mr. Griffin's cases.
That would be
Thank you.
the criminal end of it, I guess.
That's what I was trying to find out, so that's the criminal end.
So that the board knows, so when Chief Williams and I met with the residents of Potash, one of the things that came out of that is we sent them addresses and emails of different agencies that we felt that they could reach out to as private citizens. State's Attorney's Office was one of them. We have reached out to the State's Attorney's Office as well to let them know of the concerns. I know Chief Williams has talked to the District Attorney and the State's Attorney on the case as well, which I will say, I think people being so vocal and sending their emails did help in getting the incompetency hearing and having him transition to a place where he could get some assistance. What we do know over experience is that that's only going to be the case for a matter of time. And then at some point, he's going to pass a competency test and he's going to be released. That seems to be the pattern. So we definitely, with the community speaking up, and sending emails and being vocal, definitely some progress was made. And it connected us as well to the Commissioner of Mental Health and these offices to, maybe get some education on, is there stuff we could be doing? How do we advocate for this? What does the commissioner need from towns, to be vocal? And so that's a little bit of the history of.
Thank you.
So,
Julie?
it was, I'm sorry, who's that?
Heather?
It's Heather.
Go ahead, Heather.
Well, and Senator Clarkson and I have been trying to do background research because we have received many phone calls and many letters. And so the commissioner is here in response to that. And, it'll be good to hear from her. Thanks.
Thanks, Heather. So it was requested that I read a letter, and this one is from Carol Theodore, who's a chalk farm on 698 Andover Road. And it's addressed to the Windsor County State Attorney's Office, to Attorney Goodenough. And it goes, when I called your office to find out why the captioned case did not appear on the March 28 docket, I was shunted to Allie Moore's voicemail. I have yet to receive a return call. My home is one of those that Ashley came into in the middle of the night earlier this month, unannounced and uninvited. My husband and I were fast asleep in our bedroom when our grandson and his friend came into the house from the barn where they had been playing video games. They heard a voice in the loft above our bedroom. Tucker turned on a flashlight to illuminate the dark room and saw a large, disheveled, strange man at the top of the stairs. He screamed, "Run," to his friend and ran himself up another set of stairs to alert his sleeping father. The fact that my son Graham got Ashley to leave by calling 911 does not lessen the trauma of this incident. I know that my grandson will no longer feel comfortable inviting friends to visit, and I am not sure when he will again feel safe to come see me in Vermont. It is difficult to assess the impact on a sensitive teenager's psyche, but I can say with certainty that it has made me quite uncomfortable while on my own property. I have been told that he likes to wander in the woods. More than half of my acreage is wooded. I am 80 years old and not strong. Must I lock every door every time I go out to the barn garden shed, or yard from now on. This is certainly not the Vermont we value. Ashley has been a problem to folks living on the Potash Brick Road for some time, and his mental state seems to be deteriorating. No one wishes him ill, but neither do we want to continue to live in apprehension of what the future might bring. He clearly needs to be and remain at a residential facility which can assure he is properly medicated and cared for. Someone suggested that you might decline to prosecute because the judge would likely dismiss it anyway. As your mission is to protect our communities and promote public safety, I would urge you to pursue this case vigorously and do all you can to shut the revolving door that has been this man's history. Our local police department is doing all it can to keep our communities safe, but needs cooperation from the judicial and legislative branches of our government, of our state government, to do their part. Dealing with Mr. Griffin reportedly stretches their resources and no doubt their patience, leaving them short-handed to deal with other problems that might arise. It is time to find the funds needed for Vermont's mental health needs. Sincerely, Carol Theodore. And I believe there was one more that you spoke of. Is that one? And this one is from Daryl and Kathy Joe Martins of 227 Christmas Tree Farm Road, and it's to the Honorable Charity R. Clark, who is the Attorney General of Vermont. Dear Attorney General Clark, this letter was written with deep concern for the mental health of a neighbor, Ashley Griffin, in the neighborhood of Potash Brook Road, which has been a victim of Ashley's criminal behavior. This letter is not being written as a target against the person of Ashley himself, but the mental illness that is plaguing his mind and body. For many of us in the neighborhood, our lives have changed drastically because of the fear of what Ashley might be capable of doing in the midst of his mental illness. Unfortunately, it has become necessary for our doors to be locked at all times and to be aware of our surroundings each time we walk out the door, not knowing if Ashley may be roaming around our property at any time of day or night. As of late, we have chosen not to bring our grandchildren to the house, not knowing if Ashley would appear in our yard or at our door. They are too young to have this explained without frightening them and do not understand our reluctance. A short history of our relationship with Ashley, which started over 10 years ago after he moved into the neighborhood. At that time, I was a co-pastor at a church in Andover, and Ashley began attending on occasion. I had reached out to him a few times, just trying to get to know him, and he seemed at the time stable. Yet I realized he was carrying a lot of baggage from the past. I quickly learned that Ashley is very knowledgeable and intelligent individual, but I picked up that something wasn't quite right mentally. As the years passed, I helped Ashley with a loan of money to get his pickup fixed, which he paid back over a long period of time, and some house repairs and vehicle repairs that he could not do himself. He then called me asking for another loan for a car he wanted to purchase. I refused the request, which I believe may have started his dislike for me. I think this was in August of 2018. In September of 2018, after being out of contact with him for many months, he started demanding that the church owed him $10,000, for which he said I was personally responsible for some odd jobs he had done for one of the ladies of our church. I began to realize that Ashley was not mentally stable and needed help. On September 17, 2018, Ashley showed up in our yard very angry and demanding the money. Fortunately, I was home alone, so there was no threat to my wife or daughter. I reassured her that we did not owe him any money and that the money would not be coming his way. On September 18, 2018, I contacted Chester Police and secured a no trespass order against Ashley to protect my family. To our knowledge, he did not come on our property again during the terms of the notice given to him. On November 14, 2018, I was in Dollar General in Chester, Vermont, when Ashley approached me in the store demanding again the $10,000 that he imagined I owed him, but it came with a death threat. I contacted Chester PD and met with Officer Andrew Brothers to talk about this threat. On November 22, 2018, Ashley left a very angry, foul language message on my answering machine, again demanding the $10,000 with more threats. This was the last contact with Ashley before he was taken into custody and sent to a mental hospital. Both I and a neighbor, Sean Snyder, who had encountered many issues with Ashley, were called to testify twice at the hearings where Ashley was being held. I believe Ashley was treated for around 3 months before being released to his home. When he was released from treatment, he seemed to be more stable, taking care of his yard, and waving back when we drove past. We did not have contact with him again until 2022, not sure of the exact date, when we saw him hitchhiking into Chester and gave him a ride. He was courteous, and we had a pleasant conversation. It's been approximately 5 years since these unpleasant issues with Ashley, and here we are again with a man that is very mentally ill. We have been hearing of troubles plaguing the neighborhood lately, including break-ins, thefts that involved Ashley. On February 10th, 2023, my wife was driving home on Potash Brook Road just before 6 p.m. As she continued past the intersection with Farr Road, she encountered a man walking partially in the road and was nearly positive it was Ashley. After seeing him walking on the road a few more times in the following weeks, she became sure that it was Ashley that night. He was walking towards his home in the dark, not far from our home. When she arrived home a few minutes later, she found our front door propped wide open with a shovel in the front. When she arrived home a few minutes later, she found our front storm door propped wide open with a shovel and the front door wide open. I had forgotten to lock it before I left the house a few hours earlier. Chester PD was called. Officers were already on Potash Brook Road searching for Ashley because of another incident earlier that day. Detective Woodall cleared our house and we found no evidence that anyone had actually entered our home, but obviously had wanted us to know that someone had been there. Later that evening, we noticed our large thermometer smashed on the deck and one of our snow shovels thrown out into the middle of the yard. Though we didn't actually see Ashley at our home, it seemed quite likely that he was the one who had been there. Though the vandalism was minor, the attitude behind it was concerning. With all this said, and the reoccurring issues with Ashley's mental health resulting in some criminal behavior over a period of many years, we feel it is time for some type of long-term mental health care that would assure that he is taking his medications to keep him stable. This would be for his health and benefit, as well as safety and welfare of this neighborhood. Let's not wait until something bad happens to him or to someone in our neighborhood. My wife and I have been praying for Ashley for a while, and I personally desire the best for Ashley so he can live a healthy and productive life. Thank you for your prompt consideration of these very frustrating and serious issues concerning the mental illness of Ashley Griffin. And it's signed Daryl and Kathy Jo Martins. It's pretty powerful stuff when you read it and you hear from the people that are involved in this, the disruption of what's going on in your lives. It shouldn't be that way. There should be something in the system that can help and make everything work and make it right. I know healthcare in this country is in shambles, and that's whether it's healthcare or mental health care, and there's issues with funding, there's issues with personnel, there's all kinds of issues. This is not to put the blame on anybody. The people that are involved in all these agencies that help are doing the best they can, and they try to do what they can also with the resources that they have. But this country, I think, has a serious issue with a lot of items surrounding health issues and mental health issues. Is there anyone else that would like to speak? Any hands up? Sue, would you like to speak?
Commissioner Dawes first. I think she's got
The commissioner.
more to say. I'm happy to.
Sure. I don't want to put you on the spot either like this.
I'm happy to speak, and I will. I just want to defer to the commissioner first.
Commissioner Hawes, are you still there?
I am, yes, thank you.
Is there anything that you would like to add or talk or say to the folks that are here tonight?
Other than, of course, it is impactful to hear firsthand the experiences that folks are having in the community there. And I know the goal is to tried to solve something today, but you've also mentioned that we have a country and I think a healthcare system that is in need for some drastic changes. One highlight I think I've heard, and although I can't speak specifically about this case, but I have heard some frustration around competency when there's been an interaction with somebody with a mental illness or a presumed mental illness and criminal justice system. We are looking to make some changes in how we approach competency and sanity here. We have two bills currently pending in the legislature and the House side. One that we've been working on with our state's attorneys and Attorney General's office related to a forensic facility. And another bill directly related to competency and sanity with a longer goal of looking at a restoration to competency program. Now, with that said, that doesn't take away from that the department from a treatment perspective is required to serve folks in the least restrictive setting clinically. And I think that is where we find our biggest challenge is when there are different views around what's least restrictive. There's the view from neighbors like you all have indicated, and the experience that you all have indicated. There's the treatment lens of the professionals that are working directly with an individual. And then there's also an availability of resources. And then there's also that individual's choice to participate or not to participate. And so from a DMH lens, we're working to close those gaps so that folks are comfortable in their homes, both from a neighborhood perspective and somebody experiencing symptoms of mental illness, because we know that mental illness is a part of all of us. Our mental wellness is a part of all of us. And Ashley could very well be any of our brothers and family members and friends. And so I do appreciate that, the neighbors are trying, want him to get the help that he needs, and how do we create a system that can provide that for all of our community members. In general, from a competency standpoint, Vermont orders more competency evaluations than almost any other state, and that's an interesting approach that I think we have taken in order to try to steer folks out of the criminal justice system. The other side of that, though, is making sure that we understand that folks can understand a criminal, can understand court. Hold on one second. I have a young person getting ready to tell me good night, so hold on. Okay, sorry about that. So I apologize for that interruption. But now I've lost my train of thought. So I'll stop rambling, but I'm also happy to answer any questions or highlight other initiatives that I think could also impact our communities in a positive way. And that's more related to mobile crisis outreach versus folks needing to go to emergency departments, as well as diverting folks away from emergency departments by engaging in alternatives to EDs or urgent care for folks who are experiencing a psychiatric crisis. Any questions or thoughts that I'm happy to answer? I want folks to feel like their time is honored as well.
Hang on, we might have a question here.
I do have a question. 100% correct. ERs are not set up in any way, shape, or form to house these people, sometimes for a week or more at a time. But yet, I read on a regular basis how we're closing inpatient beds. And I do understand there's a crisis in psychiatric supports. But the answer to me is not to close the beds that you need to get the people out of the ER, because I've worked in an ER for 10 years, and I can tell you they sit there and they rot in a room that's closed, and they don't get therapy, and they don't get treatment, and they don't get support, because emergency rooms all over the state and any state are not equipped to support these people in that environment. But then I read Brattleboro Retreat is closing units. And I do think there has got to be some discussion, because I hear what you're saying about these people have rights too, and I get that. I get that. But I feel the pendulum swings from one extreme to the next, and there's got to be some middle ground with that. Having worked in an ER with a crisis patient who comes in and is allowed to run out the door, we have to allow them to go, call the police, hope they find them, and if they're still in that state, bring them back. But we cannot hold them there unless they're involuntary. Having worked 20 years in a Boston hospital, that does not happen. And I think we need to look to our neighbors in other states to see what happens. They get Section 12, and they're required to stay there if they meet that criteria, and they cannot leave. It is an open door for people who at some time in their life might not be able to make decisions for their own wellness and welfare. And they come and go and overburden ERs, and that's just not the place for them. Having watched this happen, it is an atrocity to see people locked up in an ER, waiting for weeks for beds, and then read about places like Brattleboro Retreat closing them. So I do think where you are, you're in a unique situation. As a nurse, I am not clearly the only nurse who has this discussion. I can tell you. I'm sure you're aware of it, but we're the people on the ground, so are the police, so are the EMS, we're the people on the ground, and this is not working. This is a very broken scenario, and then it's a revolving door, and nobody benefits. The patient doesn't benefit, nobody benefits. So when can we cut to the chase here and actually have a real discussion, or maybe create a law that doesn't have 800 pages, that just deals with the problem and actually deals with it in a way that makes common sense? And again, I just need to tell you that from my experience, which I have, that some people may not, it's a terrible place to put somebody who's in crisis, who desperately at that moment needs to have some support, and gets absolutely zero support. They get 3 squares and they're left in a room, and they get nothing they absolutely need at the moment they're in crisis when they need it the most. But we are closing inpatient beds to these people. So you're in that department, and I had to say it. I'm sorry.
Yeah, no, I mean, I get to run the department, and so
Thank you,
those are the things that I get to hear. You know, I would just clarify that related to the Brattleboro Retreat, they aren't closing beds, they're opening beds. They've doubled their capacity in the last year. And so I just want to make sure that folks are aware of that, that they're not decreasing their capacity. They've increased it over the past year substantially. And so I want to just make sure that folks are aware of that. And open beds shift in general across all units. Some close due to acuity on the unit, some close due to staffing, some close due to an operations or a custodial issue that needs fixed. So there are certainly many reasons why a hospital bed could be closed. But as far as units, the retreat is moving in a positive direction. Like I said, they have about 100% more beds online this year than they did last year.
Thank you, Commissioner. Mr. Collins?
Thank you. Jim Collins, lived in the community for over 50 years as an educator. I wanted to say a couple of things. First of all, I want to thank the Select Board and the town of Chester for being supportive. We're all frustrated here. Some of us are even more frustrated than others. Some of us are afraid that we could get hurt. Some of us are old, and that is something I want to be with my grandkids. But I want to thank the police. They've done a great job. I know when I had an opportunity, my son, for a birthday gift, wanted to take me golfing in Savannah a couple of weeks ago. I couldn't refuse that, but I almost did because I didn't want to leave my wife at home on the Potash Brook Road. So Tom called up, the police chief, called me and said, Jim, we'll go by the house a lot. We'll keep an eye on things. So out of something that is negative and scary, we see people coming together. The people on the Potash Brook Road have come together. They are concerned. They want to be safe. They love living in Chester. I don't know in a lot of communities if you could do this. But I think we're kind of beating ourselves up to try to solve the problem. When I talk to the police and they give Ashley a citation and they schedule him to go to a court appearance and he doesn't show, nothing happens. There's no follow-through. Not with the police department, but with our judicial system. So there's a lot of changes that have to take place. But I appreciate the select board listening. I do appreciate it. I was a select person once, 50 years ago, so I know what your job is like. I appreciate you having us here, so thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Collins.
Tim Roper.
Mr. Roper, you have your hand up again?
Yes, thank you. To Commissioner Hawes, thank you so much for taking your evening to come and address this group. It's really appreciated. I think what I heard you say a minute ago was that your department operates under a directive of minimal, you didn't use the word confinement, I'm not sure the word that you used, but
Least restrictive.
least restrictive, yes.
Yeah, that's the statute. Yep.
And so that's my question. Is that state statute?
That is statute.
And
correct.
how well is that defined? And at what point does least restrictive become something that's not tenable any longer?
Yeah, I think that is a really good question. Least restrictive is typically a clinical determination about what somebody's treatment needs are. Do they require a locked door or not? And I think at some point during this evening we did talk that our goal is for folks to live independently in the community. I think it might have been you, Mr. Roper, that said that. So the least restrictive it is not defined. It doesn't list out in the statute like what that means. It'd be a clinical determination from the treatment team. If somebody is involved in the criminal justice system and are receiving services under a court order, that goes through the court system, the judiciary. The defendant's represented by an attorney. The department is represented by an attorney. The state's attorney is there, and the judge and all of those folks together work to determine what's least restrictive for somebody to receive care. And so I think inherently there can be a difference in when you're looking at a human, the judiciary is going to look at somebody's situation different than a clinical lens. And we do see those activities as separate. I wasn't sure if the state's attorney was able to attend tonight. I know that maybe they were invited. But I think it's worth a consideration of following up to talk about how it can be more in the middle when we talk about folks related to their competency. And how our state's attorneys are approaching that. And we've had some really good conversations with the state's attorney's office around those cases this year. That's why we have legislation pending to help support that.
So just a follow-up question, does that legislation address the chronic ongoing issues? Because I forwarded my letter to all of our Windsor County senators as well as to our Representative Heather Chase, and I heard back from Allison Clarkson that Chester's not the only place that's having this problem. So I know you're aware of that, and I only mention it because clearly it does need to be addressed. And I'm just not sure, is legislation the only way to address that? And if so, what does that legislation need to include for a case like the one we're talking about?
No, I don't think legislation is the only thing. I mean, I think when you think about what helps somebody feel connected and stable in their homes, it's all the other Maslow's hierarchy of needs issues too. It's good housing, money, able to access food, and your your healthcare and your resources, all of those things. So I think it is a more complex issue than one bill this year, two bills next year. It's all of them working together to support our communities in a healthier way. And I think we're also certainly seeing more activity related to substance use in our communities, which I think impacts folks as well. We don't have involuntary treatment for substance use. And so if someone needs supports, that's for substance use, that's a voluntary participation. We do have involuntary for folks with mental illness, but it has to be linked to that mental illness, not related to their substance use. And so I think that we could, do some future exploration about what that looks like. I don't oversee the substance use department, so I can't speak for them, nor would I want to. But I think there are some complexities with the increases we've seen related to crime and substance use. I know the governor, and I get to participate in his 10-point community safety plan, and we just did what I think was a really helpful summit in the Bennington area that pulled as many community members together to discuss and have an understanding of what's happening on the ground, and then take a look at what state resources could be implemented to assist their communities meeting the needs of their community members. And I know that the goal of that is to really take a look at how do we help target other communities in a similar way.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Yeah, Bernie?
I'm sorry. Heather?
Can I say something? Yeah, I think this is all great to talk about legislation and what we can do in the future. But this situation, there's an individual that is very vulnerable. And on top of it, there's a community, a neighborhood that is really on edge. It's not a good situation. It's a chronic problem. It seems to be a chronic mental health problem. And I'm wondering, what else can we do in this situation? And maybe we can't talk about specifics, but could you help us understand the process of how we can get this gentleman the health care that he needs, and how can we protect this community?
Yeah, I think that's a good question. So the process to engage somebody involuntarily so a community member can complete a non-emergent emergency exam, or request for emergency exam, which is also known as an EE. That is also typically done by the screeners, and the emergency services screeners, which I believe is HCRS for Chester. It's Windsor County, am I right in that?
Yes.
Okay. So HCRS screeners would be who would also do those assessments to indicate if somebody needs, voluntary, involuntary hospitalization. But if they don't meet hospital level of care, the options look a little bit different. And the hospital level of care standard has shifted over the years. I oftentimes hear about the Vermont State Hospital would just take everyone. And at that time, the 54 beds there also were all general fund. And you didn't have to meet a hospital level of care, and folks did stay there for large portions of their life. And I think we talked a little bit about tonight, the pendulum swinging to the other side, and our goal is to get the pendulum more to the middle. So accessing HCRS, you can call HCRS's crisis line. A better way, though, that folks could do is to call 988, and that's the national crisis line. And you don't have to be in a crisis yourself, but you can call that 988 line. It's answered by folks in Vermont, and they can work to get the resources needed to the individual that you're concerned about, or even support you while you might be experiencing a potential traumatizing event related to another community member. So 988 is something I would keep at the forefront of folks' mind. And eventually what we'll be able to do is have 988 dispatch out a mobile crisis team. We're not there yet. That's plans that the department has, but goes under the future plan list. But something you can do right now is call that 988 number, and that can get you connected to folks who can support you and your friends and neighbors who might need it.
Thank you,
Can I say
Commissioner Hawes.
something?
Yeah, sure.
Commissioner Hawes, I really appreciate the time that you spent giving us some insight into your department, how it works, and the way that legislatively we can try to address some of these issues. But I'm a little bit concerned about a couple things you said. One is that you use the term substance use, which is the first time I've heard that. It used to be use substance abuse. And so when somebody is using something that is to their detriment, we're allowing them to voluntarily determine whether or not they get some help for that issue or not. And the question came to my mind is, at what point do the rights of the public outweigh the rights of the individual? We have a room full of very frustrated people here who have been dealing with an issue with a mentally unstable person for years. And yet we're not able to call things what they are. We're not able to find something that will be a solution for this particular issue. And then a minute ago, you just said that we could call some federal government program to help out. 988, I think, was it? And maybe I'm mistaken on that. But it seems to me that this really needs to be a local issue. And we as a town don't have the resources for this. The state apparently doesn't have the resources to deal with this, or doesn't have the guts to deal with it the way it needs to be dealt with. So I'm just a little bit concerned that the appearance is, and I don't want to say this, but it seems like you're kicking a can into somebody else's playground instead of dealing with it as it needs to be dealt with. And I'm sorry for the harsh words, but that's making me very frustrated to continue to hear people concerned about their safety in their homes, in their neighborhood, and yet I'm not seeing any solutions coming from the state. I recognize that this is a situation that has much broader underlying issues. We can relate it to the breakdown of the family. We can relate it to the breakdown of communities. We can relate it to high tax burdens in our state that are driving people out. I don't know if Ashley Griffin has family in the area or not, but if he did, perhaps they would be the ones that should take care of him. If he did and they all moved out of the state because they couldn't afford to live here, that's something else that we need to address.
Do you mind if I respond to that?
Sure. Go ahead, Commissioner.
And I'm okay to hear things that are harsh, right? That's what I'm here to hear. So you don't need to apologize for that. A point of clarification for 988, it's a national number, so folks only have to remember 988. But it works just like 911, in that and it goes to Vermont community. A Vermont person is who is picking up the phone for 988. And so I'm sorry if that was confusing. If you, maybe last year when your cell phone said you needed to put in 802 in order for you to call out, that was the switch that the national switch occurred so that folks could dial a 3-digit number and get help. And that's very similar to the 211 number that Vermont has that our community members can call and get a direct link to other types of community resources.
Thank you for that clarification. I appreciate it.
Yeah, you're welcome. I think, substance use, that term versus substance abuse, I think folks have shifted the lens and how to describe somebody's use of substances, and that they're using them. And I think that waxes and wanes over time. And I'm not trying to kick the can. That's the reality of our current statutes, is that there's not involuntary substance treatment for folks who may need it. I think that the court can order somebody to engage in substance abuse treatment or substance use treatment. But from, a concerned neighbor perspective, that's just not a path that we have. And that's not me trying to kick the can. That's the reality of how the state has decided to approach that from a public health lens. I can say from a mental health perspective, there is a path towards somebody receiving involuntary treatment. And your local designated agency has a crisis team that can respond when they need to in order to assess and engage with community members who might need it.
Thank you, Commissioner. I apologize, someone has their hand up online, but I can't.
Ginger Roper.
Is it Ginger Roper?
Hi, Arnie. Yes, it is. I just wanted to bring to the forefront the living conditions. Once a mentally ill person is released to out like the situation, the living conditions in which the state or whoever is releasing them to they're not livable. And what is our responsibility as a community to take care of these individuals, especially if they are unable to take care of themselves? And what I'm talking about is the lack of plumbing, the filth, it's the situation, from what I understand, from where this individual lives, is really not a livable situation. And nobody has really spoken to that. Is it Adult Protective Services that we would call? Is it the 988? As much as I am fearful with this individual in the community and in my neighborhood, it is really a responsibility of us to report this condition in which he's being released.
Thank you, Ginger. Would you like, Commissioner Hawes, would you like to speak to that point?
I can try to. Two things came to mind. One, I'm curious who determines when a home is unlivable. That certainly wouldn't be a clinical team. We have many members of our community who are living in deplorable conditions who may or may not have a mental health or substance use. We have poverty here. And so from a building perspective, I'm not sure who determines when a home is unlivable. I assume that's some inspector, so maybe that's something the town can answer.
Thank you, Commissioner. At this point, Sue, I know you've been patiently taking notes, and maybe you could help us out on some of these issues that have come up.
It makes sense for me to stand up here, and
Yeah.
it feels awkward I'm addressing.
Yeah, your voice gets picked up, so it'll
That's
go
loud
on.
enough if I...
You're fine, Kathy. Just- They can hear her if it's,
Okay.
you're fine, Sue. It'll
Is that
pick you
okay?
up.
Okay.
It'll pick you up.
Sorry. So thanks for inviting me, first and foremost. I am just for clarity, with the Agency of Human Services, I'm what's called a Field Services Director, and I represent the agency in the field, as the name suggests. So I am your Springfield District Field Services Director. I also serve the Brattleboro District, so I serve all of Windham County and Southern Windsor, and that responsibility includes all 6 departments of the agency, our department staff, and our community partner staff. So to Commissioner Hawes' point, DMH, the Department of Mental Health, the way that we do community mental health in Vermont is through designated agencies. So HCRS is the community mental health agency for this region, for Windham and Windsor Windham and Windsor counties, excuse me. And so what I provided tonight, I've handed to your town manager some information, my card, my information, all the district leaders for the Springfield district, the state office is in Springfield. I have an office there. I'm accessible by cell, phone, text, email, and the district directors are as well. So part of my responsibility is to understand what's happening in communities. I wanted to be here tonight in person. I wanted to hear what you had to say. I'm struck certainly by this very specific example and by the compassion of the people in the room to really understand this individual circumstance. I have a role to play in some of the complex care coordination for folks like this. And so I just want to, again, we're not going to solve this individual problem tonight, and I know that's frustrating. I hope you got some good information, but I'm somebody who's a resource in these situations for your community. So town managers, public safety folks, I have relationships with, and primarily the Agency of Human Services district staff, and again, our partners. So I work closely with the area agencies on aging, the mental health system. Adult Protective Services is part of one of the departments of the agency, DALE, the Department for Disability, Aging, and Independent Living. So I've given you also the HCRS crisis information, so that 911 numbers on there and the various stages of crisis intervention access. I did not include the Adult Protective Services number, but that is readily accessible, on our agency website. That is an avenue for community members to engage, report anonymously, if you wish, concerns you have about your neighbors. There's a responsibility of the area agencies on aging if that person is age 60 or over, and if they're not, actually those reports come to me. So again, I play a role kind of regionally with some of the interventions that community members can take on behalf of their neighbors and people they're concerned about. So there's a process that we go through. Feel like I wanted to talk about something else that came up and I lost it, so I apologize. But the Department of Health with the Division of Substance Use Programs is also part of our agency. The Department of Corrections is part of the agency. Health Access, which is insurance, the Department of Mental Health, as I mentioned, and the Department for Children and Families and all its divisions, so Economic Services, Family Services. And so it's a huge agency. My role is meant, again, to augment our district staff and to really be out in the community, understanding what's going on and being a point of resource and liaison. So I so appreciate Commissioner Hawes being here because she has that really specific content knowledge, obviously, about and leads the Department of Mental Health. But I just wanted to especially be here as a local face that you can call on and interact with. And that's the takeaway from tonight's meeting is what I want to do is follow up based on what I've heard tonight and provide some resource and connection beyond tonight. So that's my offer to you, as hard as it is not to leave tonight with some kind of specific next steps around the constraints of client confidentiality. So happy to do that, want to offer that. You have my information. I'm happy to answer questions, but just wanted to introduce myself, make sure you know that I exist and know how to access me first and foremost, and then just offer any support or information beyond what you've heard tonight that might be helpful. So thank you.
I have a couple questions real quick.
Thank you, Ms. Graff. Go ahead,
Can I
Arlene.
ask a couple quick? My knowledge comes from television and various other places. I've listened to everything, and I'm wondering if you or someone at HCRS, and you don't need to answer yes or no, but if you have a file on this particular person. So in my mind, I think someone somewhere has a file on this citizen. So my question to you is, who here, either the citizens from Potash Brook Road, our town manager, the select board, someone who's joined us on Zoom, who here can open a case or start a file or come to you and say, we want to start a report? How do we start an action, and who here can do that? And lastly, when that process can happen, can all of the minutes of this meeting, the letters that have been submitted, can we immediately put that in whatever this file or this report is? So we take this last incredible hour and a half of information and we immediately put it into a system so it's got a file somewhere. How does that work locally here in Windsor?
It's a great question, and I'll try to answer it, and certainly would defer to the commissioner as well. The judicial system is not part of the agency, and so if this, when individuals are involved in the criminal justice system, those are case files and judiciary documents that I'm not privy to. In terms of our agency, if this person or any person were involved with HCRS, which again is the mental health agency, they would have, client and case files. So, and I would imagine, welcome this kind of contextual information to that. That may not, the information about that individual and that client, understandably, would not be available to you.
I'm talking about the opposite.
Nope.
I'm saying,
Yep.
let's give
Yes.
the system everything so we can get started.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, that's I think, again, I can't speak to, and I see nodding, that's good. And Commissioner, if you want to say anything else, or if I'm saying anything egregious here, but yes, I think that's the work that we do when we do complex case coordination, is we want to understand where this person, how they have interacted with all of the systems and why we're still at a sticking point. And so all this information, all the context about somebody is enormously helpful. That can come from primary care providers, that can come from mental health providers, that can come from, civic associations, that can come from all kinds of systems. So we do gather that information. Where it lives exactly depends on who's the primary sort of entity that's managing the case, I would say.
That would be my next question.
Yeah.
Of the people in this room, you've got officials and you've got neighbors.
Yep.
Who would you call? 2 days from now, you go, oh, I thought of a thing. Who in this room are you going to communicate with? Or would it be appropriate to communicate
For anybody in this room, they can call me. So if you've got more information about this particular case in the short term, long term, I'm a resource to you locally. And then again, I'm going to make sure that information gets to a team of people who's working on an individual case. So
in the short term, for follow-up, for Arnie or Julie or myself or any of these citizens,
Yep.
coming out of tonight's work, are you in fact the person we should be calling to say?
I'm going to say yes. I'm going to look at the commissioner as well.
Yeah.
In light of just the two of us being here, yes, that's absolutely my role. That doesn't mean that I'm necessarily going to be the point person on this case forever. What it means is I'm somebody you can access to provide information to that's going to make sure it gets to the right people. So yes, I am. That is me.
That feels like a good start, because until 5 minutes ago, I don't think any of us knew who we were going to call.
Right, you didn't. So that's fine. Thank you.
I might, if you don't mind, I'll add on to Sue's response. Folks are always welcome to reach out to the mental health, the Department of Mental Health. We have a care management team that covers the entire state. And that team also answers community calls. So we often receive calls from concerned neighbors and community members who will call and say, I'm very concerned about so-and-so. I know you can't tell me information, but I'm going to tell you all the things I know and just tell you that I'm concerned. There's nothing that stops you from calling the department and also sending your letters to the department. We can't respond. We're not allowed to do that, but you could certainly send those letters, and if you have other concerns, you can call the department directly if Sue isn't able to fulfill what your request is. The other thing I would suggest that you could do is send your letters to HCRS. they can't respond and say that they've gotten them or that they'll do anything with them. But I think if they did have a file on somebody that you were concerned about, it's likely they would, put that information together and put it, in a place where the treatment providers would have access to it. I've seen that happen and be successful as well. And again, that's you all giving the provider information, not the provider confirming that they're working with them, because they're going to say, I can't confirm or deny, that we're working with this individual, but that doesn't stop you from providing information. And so I certainly would encourage that as well. Sue's right. I think, Sue, you probably are the on the ground point. That's why the Agency of Human Services has field service directors, and we value that role so much. And then my suggestions are maybe like a step 2. So there's a few things.
And certainly, I don't need to be in the middle, so those are great suggestions, and Emily, again, Commissioner Hawes, again, is the content expert in the mental health space, so I sometimes forget and can't keep all that in. I think part of the information I gave also, I think Commissioner Hawes mentioned, or somebody mentioned 211, that's a more general, that's a statewide information and referral resource that anyone can call. So again, if you're concerned your neighbor needs food, or 211 is a great non-emergency information referral, health and human service resource statewide. They have a website, but it's an easy number to remember as well. So, I'm trying to, I think we're trying to give you some shortcuts. I'm happy to be, I don't have to be in the middle of those contacts, but I can be if you want to remember one person and it's me, great. If you want to go the other routes, there's no wrong door for that information. Yeah.
So I have a compilation of all the letters, so tomorrow I will send them to you and to HCRS.
Great.
Okay. Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Kathy?
Oh, let me, okay.
So I don't live near this person. My name is Kathy Hasbrook, and I live on Pleasant Street. So I'm hearing that when this person is in crisis and he's upsetting his neighbors, the police are called. And then I hear there's a lot of support available, or there's some support available in the mental health community, but do the police, and then there's 988, which is a crisis number. So is there supposed to be a connection between the police and the crisis number? Because it feels like what I'm hearing is there's a crisis, the police are called, and it stops there. And there seems to be no way for this person to get any help for his, physical, mental problems. So is there a gap between calling 988 and the police, or am I understanding that correctly?
I'm happy to answer, Commissioner. There isn't, there's communication there. So if police are called, any public safety intervention is done, there's a communication, if it's a mental health related, to, in this case, HCRS. So if it's primarily mental health and somebody calls HCRS directly, some police departments have police social workers. That's a program in some police departments. I don't believe Chester does. But sometimes resources can be pulled. I know Springfield has a police social worker. So there could be, if it's identified that someone is in, the situation is not of a criminal nature, but of a mental health crisis nature, then yes, there's absolute communication. Again, I can't vouch for how hard and fast or that it works 100%, but that's absolutely the intention, is that relationship and all that information about a case, if it is deemed to have a mental health issue, is communicated. So, Commissioner, did I get that correctly?
Yeah, I would just add that it's not consistent statewide how police departments communicate or connect with the local designated agency. I think some relationships are really strong, and some there's room for improvement. And then, like Sue said, some police departments have purchased social work time and funded a position, an embedded social worker position, to support their response. And so, you know, HCRS does have embedded police or embedded social workers in several police departments in the county, and I think as well as the Vermont State Police Barracks. But that might be something to think about. Does the town want to develop a social worker position and fund that, or look for funding for that?
Thank you, Commissioner.
There, conversations are, the board doesn't know about, but there are conversations that are just beginning with me and the Public Safety Department about different things that we might be able to do, so there will be stuff coming your way.
Sure, sir.
So just one more point of information. Someone asked around living conditions. So that is the town health officer. So you have someone in every town with other jobs and other hats, absolutely, whose responsibility is. So any resident can make a complaint. Some towns have rental registry sort of oversight to rental property. That's separate. It might be a separate process. It may be the same person, but there is a town health officer whose responsibility is, and I rely heavily on those folks. So thank you to those folks in every town that do that work, because a lot of that information comes to me, and that's one avenue for, again, assessing what's going on for somebody, if it's safe, can they live there, is it habitable? Some of our emergency housing policies depend on if somebody is accessing emergency housing because their place has been deemed inhabitable. That has to be an official process. So again, to Commissioner Hawes's point, it's not a clinical definition, but agencies like the Area Agency on Aging, which is Senior Solutions for this area, or your town health officer might, definitely plays a role in that. And I do hear a lot about, people are concerned. So that adult protective safety line can also be an avenue. Again, if you're concerned that the condition of someone's home is not, it's in a condition that is not habitable, no running water. We hear a lot about animal, hoarding, things like that. So, just know that those are the avenues to go through for that. So thanks for letting me clarify.
Thank you, Sue. I just want to thank everybody for attending tonight and speaking their mind and speaking their stories that they've had. I want to thank the commissioner and the director for being here also. I think it's important for folks that are in this area of health, mental health, to hear it on the ground, to see what's actually happening out in our communities. I know it was mentioned that it's a problem all over Vermont. That's a little discerning that it's a problem all over Vermont, just not our town, and hopefully it does get addressed in the future. The word I kept hearing a lot was the least restrictive when it came to answers and stuff. And I know freedoms are important and liberties, and we pride ourselves in Vermont for that. But sometimes someone else mentioned the rights of the citizens should outweigh the rights of one person. So it's kind of, when I hear least restrictive for care for something like that, it seems like the pendulum went too far the other way, and it should be somewhere in the middle somewhere where other people's rights are taken into account a little more. I'm glad everybody came here to have a place to voice their opinion and tell their stories. I appreciate all the people that are here to help us along with this discussion. I hope in the future, a couple of months from now, we'll be saying that something actually became of these discussions, and something positive is going to happen. I don't know what's going to happen or what's going to be in the future, but hopefully there'll be some positive outcome from it. If there's anybody else that would like to make a comment before we move on our agenda, I would offer their time now if they'd like. If not, we're going to have...
I'd just like to make a comment. I've grown up here. I'm now part of government, and this really, for me, it's pretty upsetting because this is not where we should be, and it's not where our neighborhood should be. This is, the problem has been going on now for more than 10 years. So, and it recycles itself. So I really, I feel like I have to apologize because we haven't come to a solution, and we're kicking the can down the road, just as Lee said. And I'm pretty uncomfortable with that because I would really like to see us figure something out. I understand the person's problem that he's trying to deal with in a mental health way, but I know what it does to the rest of you, and I just would like to apologize. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. If there's no other further comments or questions?
Question on that.
Comment.
I'm sorry. Eustace and Carol, you have your hand up?
Yes, I am in regular contact with the victim's advocate because I was the other person whose home Ashley came into after he left the Ropers. I live across the street, and she knows that I'm really worried about whether and when he gets released. So we talk on a regular basis. I know, therefore, that he has a hospitalization hearing next week. How can we ensure that all of this information gets to that hearing?
Sue, would you be able to help us on that question?
Yeah, Carol, I'm going to send everything to Sue and DC, the other place, tomorrow, and then Sue will make sure it gets where it needs to go.
Thank you.
And the state's attorney has all this stuff as well, so hopefully that will be, yeah.
In terms of the judicial
Yeah.
system, that's the best.
Yeah, all these letters are within the judicial system, but Sue will make sure that they get where they need to go.
Yeah, my understanding is that the hospitalization hearing is not part of the judicial system, but part of the mental health system.
That's my.
So he's currently at the state hospital.
Yep, I'm with you. Sue will make sure it gets where it needs to go for that hearing.
Thank you.
Thank you, Carol. At this point, we're going to move on our agenda, but we're going to take a little 2-minute recess. So if there's folks here that would like to clear out, welcome to, or you can hang around for the rest of the meeting if you like.
Thank you, yeah. Okay. I really reach out. I don't want to talk about it on the record, but I know our police department has a really hard time this right now. I feel like with the Department of Health, they're not responsive when they call. So there is definitely a breakdown there, so maybe we'll connect with you. We'll connect with you.
My note was like PD, HRS,
Yeah.
convene a meeting.
Yes, yes.
This is not.
We'll connect.
Just for the it's not a very sure.
Correct.
It's a challenge,
Yeah.
especially
And we are doing, we had some conversations this morning about some different ideas that I have. I think it would be what we may be looking to do is very unique. I'm kind of thinking about maybe toying with creating a position, not a fully embedded social work, but how we can tie that into emergency services with police and do some kind of a pilot thing. So this is perfect to have your name, because we were talking earlier about who can we pull together?
Here you have the deja vu and all these girls are here still.
Great. We'll be in touch. Yeah.
I want to be part of the solution in case I'm sorry, our hands are a little tied.
Well, not so much that.
You've got like 2 weeks to set a case, and it's indicative of what you.
When's lambing?
Well, and there's no immediate
We're a little over a week.
solution. That's the. Thank you so much.
So what was your last
30?
Do we have your email address?
Yeah, you've got
Okay.
my card.
You can't have sleep this time of year.
Thank you so much. Appreciate you.
I will email everybody with, I will scan this document that she gave with all the.
I decided to quit. I quit when I was 54 and I was happy.
Good. You're very welcome. Hopefully we can get some. But this is what's important. This is what's important.
Makes you feel better. spend more money on We have this problem too, and I talked to Preston on the table. No, but okay, so now you're spending. You do. Well, the thing is, you do have community, but you gotta. There's just this thing is just well, they're carrying the political line. No, you need to say it. It's true. What can you do for them? You're on the, you know, for me, I'm on the other side of the table, so I should be able to fix this. Oh. You know?
Your 2 minutes.
And you know that there's no easy solution. No, there's
You said this was going to be a short meeting. I knew this needed to happen, just like last time.
It's cold tonight.
Huh?
It's cold.
I'm voluntarily taking my long underwear off yet. Mostly because I have to go to the barn for that. Huh?
I don't know. Yeah.
This is going to fall where it's going to fall.
Least
Yeah.
restrictive.
I mean, there's nothing really. It's in the agenda, and it's,
Kind of went to that end. at least
it is where it is. I don't think the gas, well, the gas is policy, they've already spoken, but I think.
We ready?
Yeah.
I'm tired.
Are we going to call the meeting back to order again?
I'm supposed to eat my cookie.
The next item on our agenda is a review of our conflict of interest policy. Part of this is for some of our new members, and part of it is just a bit of a refresher for our old members. Has everybody had a chance to go through this? Check it out. Or did anybody have any questions on it or any concerns on how it's worded or what it means and stuff? I remember when we first went through this, with the policy that we have adopted here, it was because of VLCT that made a recommendation that we do have a conflict of interest policy back in, I think it was 2015 or 2016 and stuff. It states a lot of information on it. There's some things that are definitely prohibited. There's some things that are allowed. A lot of it has recommendations, but not much teeth to it, too, because it comes down to the fact that if there is a conflict, you don't have much authority to do anything about it. You can make it known and make sure that people are aware of it, but other than that, there's not much else. Now, part of it on my case, and Peter, I guess I'm going to just bring it up, that it involves you on your membership on the Planning Commission. And the fact that our policy basically states that is not allowed. And I was wondering what your take on it was and what your action is going to be regarding that.
Okay, so one of the things that I ran on for this board was the lack of communication. And if you look at your policy, and even the people who signed it then, and the people who are on this board, there is none of them that have been on the Planning Commission and none of them that have been on the DRB. So you taking the select board is not communicating with any of the other boards. And this has kind of been, if you look at it, it's been an ongoing problem for at least the last 8 years. Now, in the last year, it's kind of turned around. It's because I've made an effort. There's been, when you have a policy like this, for instance, when we do zoning regulations, it's not required for us to put them by the DRB, but I make it a policy of mine that it needs to be there. So I have to honor your policy here, but I think it breaks communication down. It does not work well with going with the other boards. The people who did this had not served on those other boards, so they didn't understand the communication. Now I understand that this is the town's policy. I see a problem with it. It's not going to get changed tonight. I've given it quite a lot of thought, and I think I can go to any of the town planning board meetings and just not have a vote if I resign from the Planning Commission. And we don't vote on that many things. But the biggest problem that this policy creates is a lack of communication between the boards, and that is always going to be an ongoing problem unless you really want to solve it. So with that, I will give Julie tomorrow, I'll give her a letter that resigns from the Planning Commission. But on the other hand, that doesn't solve the problem of the lack of communication between those boards. And actually the select board, really, the hardest thing that has been about this is I have heard both from you and I've heard from Lee, and I don't really think you understand how much work the planning board has to do to put things together and how much effort that takes.
Well, thank you for telling me what I don't understand.
Excuse me, can I finish?
Go ahead.
Thank you. The thing is that you say that regardless of what we bring here, that the select board can just change it and send it back. But when you're working with planning, you're starting with a concept and you're trying to build the concept forward. So it's not so much that you can just line things out and say this doesn't work and that doesn't work. You have to build on it. All right. You can now go right ahead. Thank you.
Go ahead, Ariana.
I just had a couple questions. The conflict of interest policy seems to cover two things. One is serving on multiple boards, and the other is when an issue comes to anybody who's in government office, they need to recuse themselves. The part about recusing ourselves when there's another issue that is we have an interest in, that seems to make sense the way it's written, boilerplate, like you said, it's there. The question of conflict of interest by serving on multiple boards, I'm curious if there's an appetite for considering in the future, so putting on a future agenda, a select board representative, a situation where, for instance, a select board representative is assigned to the Planning Commission, a different select board representative is assigned to the DRB. They don't necessarily attend and they don't vote, but they are the person who agrees to read all the minutes, attend some meetings, be aware, and report back to the select board on behalf of the DRB or something like that. Is there a world where we take this where we want it in silos for one reason, but we look at how we keep an open path between the three entities. I do believe, Peter, that as I've been on the board for 1 month and have not served previously on the DRB, the Zoning Commission, the Select Board, anything else, I do believe that the goal, when we have a 5-person select board, a smaller zoning and smaller planning, would be that it not become one group of 3 or 4 people that are then in power over all 3 of the most ordinance-related bodies in the community. So if the goal is not to have a small group take responsibility for all 3, perhaps there is room for language that allows for one person to serve on both planning and select, but never 2 of the 3 or no more than 2. Like, do we want to look at algebra and Venn diagrams in order to create a collaborative workflow for all 3 of these groups that need to do so much for this town?
Right, because we used to have a DRB member that was also on the planning board. And this completely does away with that, too.
There was a lot of things that were different at the time, and I know everybody's looking at me because I was the one that kind of pushed this and stuff, because it's a policy that I was involved with when we made it. Some corrections, Tom Bach was on the select board and was on the planning commission. And the fact that you said that I don't have an understanding of all the hard work that the planning commission does, they take a little offense to that. I do know how much hard work they do, Peter. And you're not the only one that could realize that can solve all the world's problems. I don't think there's a lack of communication between the boards either. I think they do a fine job of what they're supposed to do in relaying that information to us. I think at any time that a board member wants to go to any of these meetings, they're allowed to. They're allowed to speak their mind as a citizen. They're allowed to participate. They're allowed to be there. The policy was put into place because to avoid a conflict of interest. Now, if you have a person that's on the select board and also on the planning commission, that person can't vote on anything on the select board when the planning commission comes forward. So you actually have less power. Now you only have 4 people. 2 people could tank anything that comes along. You wouldn't need a majority to stop something. So that's not fair to the select board or to the planning commission. I think the communication's there. I think you need a little humility and maybe a little hubris on your abilities to carry through on a lot of what's happening here and stuff. I appreciate the fact that you're well versed in the planning commission and you have a lot of experience and knowledge there. And that's going to be helpful on the select board, that experience and stuff. But to serve on the 2 boards, we went through this. We can have this discussion again. The policy could change if we decided to change it, to have board members be able to do both. But it was pretty clear, even in this policy, that we were going to allow planning commission members to be on the DRB if we had to. At this point, there are plenty of citizens that want to get involved in town government. And I think that we should welcome the fact that there's people involved that want to be part of government instead of us taking 2 or 3 roles on that is not necessary and is not going to help anything. That's my idea.
So can I ask a history? I asked Julie to pull a history of this together because I didn't understand what was behind it. And reading through the minutes that were provided relative to adopting the current policy, it seemed to me that there was some undercurrent that wasn't necessarily related completely in the minutes. And so I'm just wondering if there's any clarification on the rationale behind the current policy as far as not serving on the select board and one of these other 2 boards or commissions.
Just what's in the minutes is what I said.
I actually have no recollection of the discussion, which is kind of concerning in a lot of ways.
Well, it seemed to me, sorry, Heather, do you have any insight on this?
Yeah, I remember it very well. It was one of the first things that happened. It took us like over a year, and there was a lot of debate. And at the time, historically, there were a lot of times when there were a lot of people on multiple boards. And at the time, I think even you and I, Arnie, were like, well, if need be, as I recall. And then John D. Benedetti felt really strongly that, as I recall, this is all from my memory, that we want more people. Well, he didn't want more people. He didn't want people on the select board and also on the other two major boards in town. And, you know, we all agreed on it, and that's the policy of the way it is. And I think that the reason at one point that there were so many crossovers is that people weren't participating. And now, you know, how many people did we have running for two select board positions? It's a different atmosphere now. And there was some issue that Tom Bach was on both the planning and the select board for multiple years and multiple terms, as I recall. And when the planning board came, he would recuse himself, like Arnie said. So it's my view that we can reevaluate this because we can always reassess our policies. But this is the way the policy is now. And we have a lot of people participating, which is really good. The other thing that I'd like to just comment on is I think it was a year and a half ago, that we decided that we were going to have multiple meeting once a year, something with all the boards, a mutual, where everyone gets together. I, like with Arnie, take a little bit of offense to the comment that I don't understand how much work it takes. I really think that to run this town, the DRB, I've been through that process a couple of times as an individual. I've gone to some planning board meetings. There's a lot of work that goes on. So anyways, those are just my comments.
Thank you, Heather.
So can I just read a section of the minutes? So this is from, I don't know,
7 years ago.
11/2/2016, yeah, and it's a comment that Sean Cunningham made. So Sean, maybe you can talk about this, but
what page are you on?
if I can find it again, I'm sorry. Okay, so it's on page 3 of those first set of meeting minutes. Sean Cunningham stated that up until very recently, there has been dual membership and wondered why the change. He stated that he feels that the perception is that the board is intentionally not allowing dual membership to prevent an applicant from being on the planning commission. And then I thought I read somewhere else where somebody said something about we reached our objective or whatever it was. So and this is going to give me hot water, but was there a specific reason why, or somebody specifically targeted for this particular change? And the other question relates to it, and that is, I'm not seeing, other than what you just brought up a few minutes ago, I'm not really seeing a potential issue or huge conflict between somebody being on the select board and the planning commission, other than what you said, that person would have to recuse himself from a vote on the select board for a particular.
That's a big deal.
And that's of concern to me, but I think that unless the planning commission is acting in a way and not telling us what's going on, and it's a huge surprise to us that we're going to come to a split decision on that, I'm not sure that's a huge concern to me.
Well, then,
just curious.
Then we should probably look at rehashing it. But the fact is, if we're going to change it now to allow something that goes on that's different than what our policy is, that's kind of like spot zoning. You know, oh, well, we have this situation, so let's change the policy to reflect what we want in the moment. That's not good policy. Good policy is you have a policy, you review them every so often. And
I don't recall anything being specific as far as doing it for a reason, other than the reasons that were stated in there. There was no ulterior motive to get rid of somebody or to can anybody or anything else behind the scenes on like that. If anything, it was Tom Bach who was getting tired of being on both and saw the conflict and said that we have to do better, and wanted to have more people involved with it.
Okay.
I mean, we have 3 different boards for a reason. It's like legislative, judicial, and you know, whatever.
Executive.
Executive, I mean, kind of, and we're kind of the executive, and they're the ones that make the rules and regulations, and then DRB enforces them. You don't have a Supreme Court justice that sits on both of them. You don't have a senator rolling around on both of them, no matter how big his expertise is and his knowledge is of what's going on. It doesn't stop the communication. It doesn't stop his involvement or a person's involvement if he wants to be a part of another board, to go to the meetings, to be involved with it and stuff. That's welcome, to have that communication part of it.
And Arnie, the other time that there'd be conflict of interest would be when we're appointing people to the board. As the select board, yeah, okay.
I mean, you wouldn't be able to vote on that too, then, on appointment.
Well, you're going to have, that choice is going to come up, because you're going to have 2 appointments, plus if I resign, you're going to have a third. So you're going to have that decision that you're actually going to end up having to appoint 3 people to that board this year.
Yeah.
So you're going to start off with inexperience. Now, a little exception that I'll take to it, the first, with some things that you and Heather have said, the first 2 years are on the board, I never heard from the select board. The year that I was the chairman, the only way I got to talk to you or bring anything up to you, Arnie, is I had to talk to you. You did not come and ask us how we were going.
Yeah, and I,
You
and
did,
Pete,
and don't, please. You know, if you're going to talk down to me, then really talk with reality. Please, the last year, things were different. I waved and flagged it up. I got up and took a huge chance for the, you know, and that's the way it was. It wasn't going to happen because anybody on the board was involved and was going to say something. Now, you're going to get your, you know, I'm going to resign from there, so you have your policy that stands. But you need to be listening to what's happening to these boards and how they're interacting.
thank you, Peter, I appreciate that.
Well, you know, there's also, Peter, there's one part about, you know, being involved and looking at what's going on. The other side of it is you appoint people to do a job and you delegate it. And if they have issues or concerns, you're open to hearing from them. So the fact, if Arnie, people who've been on the board did not come to the meetings or ask you, we delegate that responsibility with our appointments.
Can I make another comment? So, one of the reasons why I wanted to talk about this wasn't necessarily just about this particular duplicative appointments, whatever. But the main concern that I have is one that Ariana brought up a few minutes ago, and that is understanding the conflict of interest policy as it relates to individuals. And I know we've had in the past issues come up and votes taken where, honestly, I think people should have recused themselves from those votes, and they didn't. And I know there's no teeth, there's nothing that says I can make somebody recuse themselves. But I think we need to understand the reason behind this conflict of interest policy and what it means when it comes to things that are being voted on or requested or whatever, so that we're being transparent. Because if I have an issue that I feel passionately about and I brought it before the board and I've done some behind the scenes things to try to get everybody's, I mean, there's nothing wrong with that unless there's some personal gain that I get from it. As an example, we put in EV charging stations a couple years ago, and my company submitted a bid for that. We were the low bid, but I declined the contract because I knew it would be seen as a conflict of interest. And so that's the type of thing that I think we need to be aware of is it just, am I serving on 2 boards? No, I think there's a lot of discussion that we can have about that. But the main thing that I was concerned about was if I have a direct or indirect personal or financial interest in something, then I need to be willing to say, is this something from which I need to recuse myself, or is this something I can be totally objective? And that was my concern in wanting to bring this up, was not, to get into this big argument about whether or not the conflict of interest policy needs to be changed, but are we going to abide by it? And what does that mean for me? What does it mean for each one of us? There's 5 of us on this board. We all have different interests, and do we take that, take our own interests seriously enough to understand and recognize when we may have a conflict. I guess that's all I was looking for at this point, was have a discussion about that. I think enough said. I don't know that we need to have further discussion, but that was my main purpose in bringing this up.
You know, with a small town, they talk about financial interests and things like that. Like, those are the obvious and the easy ones. It's the other interests and stuff, but we all have interests. We all have areas that we are especially passionate about or want to be involved about, or and champion those interests as it goes along. Is that a conflict because you're passionate about an interest and it's going to benefit you in some way because some hiking trail is going across a hill that you like to hike on and stuff, or the rec area is being improved because you like to roller skate? It's a tough one with conflict of interest.
Exactly.
The money part's the obvious one. That's the easy one. Hey, you're going to sell a piece of land and my uncle's going to make a killing on it because we're going to put up a town garage there or something. That's a little more understandable. It's the nuances of a small town and stuff that we're all here for the same reason. We want the town to do better. We want we want a community to be growing and thriving and prospering. So if we start dickering with each other at this level here, it's not going to help.
And that's my point. I'm not suggesting that we point fingers at each other. I think we just need to be introspective and say, how does this affect me? Am I conflicted here? That's all I'm suggesting.
Well, and I think what the intent of this is not to prevent anyone from having conflict of interest because we're in a small town. It's to, what if there is a perceived conflict or a conflict of interest, is to state that in public that, you know, that's the way it is, and then it can be discussed. I think that that's part of the reason to have the policy, is to just get people to have transparency about it.
Okay, so what I ran on, and I was very transparent about it, is I ran on a housing committee, and I ran on the communication that it was going to take between planning and between the select board and between a housing committee. I clearly stated all my conflicts. You know, that's what I needed to do. Arnie, you think I'm saving the world? I tried to do that, but God, I was back in my 20s. Right now, I am cursed with a developer's brain, that I see pathways to solve a problem, and that's what I really want to do with it. But, you know, if you believe that this is the best case for that, then this is the bylaw that it should be. You know, you're calling it out, and you're saying, no, you can't do that.
Well, I'm not calling it out. I'm calling out a policy that's written, and it's pretty evident what it says. I mean,
right, but
I am the
when
chairman of the
I
board
ran,
here.
nobody brought this. If somebody brought this policy up, it would have been a different thing, because I probably wouldn't have run for selectman.
Honestly, I had no idea that we even had this policy until we got it.
Right.
It doesn't.
Well, and I thought we were reviewing it when we were signing our oaths. I thought we reviewed it.
When I signed my oath, the oath didn't completely say that you were supporting the Constitution of the United States. It didn't say it where there was a typo on the bottom of it, and everybody else had signed, and it was 2 days. I was the third one who signed it, and Deb had to fix it. So even that sheet that we signed wasn't right, and there was no conflict. There was nothing. Deb didn't even know about it at that time.
Peter, I know.
Peter, what do you prefer to be on?
And you have a lot to offer the board. Your style grates on me. I got to tell you that. But that's, you know.
Goes two ways.
Okay. It's fine.
Peter, what would you prefer to be on if you had to choose one?
That's the goal is to build housing, and the path to build the housing is communication. Now, you can say that you appointed someone so you didn't have to worry about it, you know, and they could just do probably more times than you can count, because I keep trying to figure out where the best way to be the path is. And the thing is, on the planning board, I'm probably just going to sit on a table and decide, still get everything that's there. There are not that many votes on the planning board for what goes forth. It's the idea that you have to build on to build out what you're going to do. So that's actually the conclusion that I came to. So it's saying which board would I prefer to be on? Doesn't make the path work.
All right, Hugh?
Hi, it's Hugh Quinn. I just have one thought while I'm listening to this. I can clearly understand the dilemma here. On the one hand, work that the Planning Commission does must be approved by the Select Board. So there's a hierarchy there of decision-making where the Planning Commission is subservient to the Select Board in terms of decision-making. So the idea that you have the same person on two boards, I think, is a little bit of a conflict of interest. Now, one thing you could do, and it's not going to solve the problem for tonight, but it's something to think about, is rather than have the conflict of interest policy state that you can't be on two boards, you could change the policy and make it clear that the Select Board member who's on the Planning Commission can't vote. Because right now, it's up to Peter to recuse himself. So if you wanted to make that a little more, or any Select Board member for that matter, if you wanted to make that a little tighter, you could have the policy prevent the dual member from voting. But it does then take the Select Board vote from 5 to 4, which, is it going to be a problem? I don't know, but it wouldn't be optimal. It's a suboptimal situation. So I'm just throwing that out as a possible going forward strategy for somebody to be on two boards. Having the person without any policy at all, it's up to the individual to recuse themselves. And I think that's not enough of a policy.
So before you go anywhere, Hugh, you could have been in that same exact situation.
Yeah.
What would you have done?
Well, I'm glad I'm not in that situation because I want to finish the work on the Planning Commission. So but that would have been a problem. So that's what I would have done.
Thank you.
Yep.
Kathy.
Go ahead, Kathy.
So I'm Kathy Hasbrook, and I am speaking not just as a member of the Planning Commission, but as someone who did the minutes for both the DRB and the Planning Commission for several years now. And if I wasn't actively participating, I was an interested observer. When the Planning Commission was working on the bylaws they got from Brandy Saxton, it did feel like a pretty siloed undertaking. They weren't reaching out and talking to other people. They were like heads down in that big book. And when things kind of blew up, I remember people from the Select Board saying, we didn't know what was going on. And so, but, the ship righted itself, I think. I don't think I don't think that those bylaws would have been helpful to Chester. And we're moving in a different direction now. And I think it's a good idea to look for diversity on the boards. And I can understand how you might want to say, look, we've got 15 positions, let's get 15 different people involved. But another issue about diversity that's complicated by the rule about open meetings And you can't talk business with more than 2 people on any board outside of a warned meeting. Means that it's harder for diverse people to come to know each other and understand their working styles and, form a way to communicate in a couple hours every 2 weeks. I worked in a insurance company in Hartford. I was a programmer. I felt like, sometimes I feel like I was in the basement and chained to a desk. I didn't have to work with a lot of different people. I just had to get the program to work right. And that's a very different way of working and being with people from somebody who's got their own business, So I've had to learn a lot about working with different people, different styles, things like that. I hate the open meeting law when it limits the ability for people to sit and chat with each other and talk over problems and not come to a conclusion, but at least hear other ideas in a relaxed environment. If you don't want to change the conflict of interest policy, maybe what would be better is that we take an hour every 3 months and get all 15 people together just to chat. It'd have to be a warned meeting, and we'd all have to put up our own agenda about it. But there is, I think if there had been more communication in some way or other, formal or informal, before we went down the rabbit hole of those bylaws, it would have saved a lot of heartache for a lot of people. I don't envy your issue here, but I would support one person being from the select board being on the planning commission. Would support, I would feel good about having planning commission people attend DRB meetings. I'm not so sure the DRB needs to be sending a representative to the planning commission, but I also really like the idea that when the planning commission comes up with bylaw changes, that they discuss them with the DRB. And it almost should be a requirement. We almost need their permission as much as we need yours. So anyway, we can, I think, formalize more of the communication that happens between the 3 committees. I think that might help. And thank you.
Thank you, Kathy. Thank you. And one point that I did get out of what you just said is the communication part. And maybe that's my lax part on me, because we did have conversations about when we were going to have planning commission come to the select board once a year, twice a year, to give us an update, to have that communication, or maybe have joint meetings. And we haven't had that in a while. So that, I think, is
About a year.
A great idea because of the communication stuff. I still would not recommend having a board member on both boards. And for the reasons stated about voting, about the examples of the 3 branches of government and trying to keep them separate, away from each other, the one that makes the law, the ones that enforce the law, and the judicial, the executive, and the legislative part of it. And that's kind of the way it works here, too. So having one person involved with both of them, it just doesn't make sense to me, and it doesn't help with the select board as far as the voting part of it goes. And it also, when it comes to the communication, we could do better on it in other ways. It doesn't have to be a member that has to be on both boards to have that communication happening and to make sure that it's productive and we're going in the right direction. I mean, that's not the point that it's, it just doesn't make sense that way. I mean, the policy was written with some of that in mind. As far as back then, it was harder to get anybody to be on any committee whatsoever. We were scraping by just to get people on things. Right now, I think if you put out a notice for members of the planning commission, we'd have a big response. And I don't think until it becomes a problem when we don't have enough people that in my mind, that we would address it and then maybe try to think of a remedy. Until that happens, then, I would say, okay, then maybe we have an issue and we might have to do something a little different. But I would think that the more people we get involved in local government in our town, the better off we're going to be as a community, because we will have a lot more diverse interests. And the communication was happening for a while, and I remember a meeting 2 years ago, and it's the meeting that you're referring to, when the Planning Commission came before the Select Board, and the Planning Commission chairman decided to disregard all the information that he was going to present, that the Planning Commission was going to ask him to present to the Select Board, and went off on his own route. Some people say he fell on the sword to save the town or whatever. There was some, comments regarding what were happening there. There was a process in place to take care of things, had the process followed through for people to address different things. That's the communication that we had the last time with the Planning Commission, and that's probably why things have kind of disintegrated a little bit since then. And it's probably my fault that I haven't tried to bring these boards back together and have that communication a little more often.
So I'm thinking that in order to support the diversity and, many different styles of working, that maybe if we have something formal, so it's not about, it's not spontaneous. It doesn't have to be spontaneous. You don't have to round up 15 different people and generate enthusiasm for this. But if we made it a policy, that might have some good results. It might get a ball rolling that's not moving very fast now.
But no matter what we do on communication like that, we would have to follow open meeting laws with the warning,
right?
Make sure there's
and
enough
everybody's
people
got to
and
write
the
their
whole
own
thing.
agenda. Yeah,
It'd be great to sit around with a cup of coffee and start chatting and figuring everything out, but we're not allowed to do that. We're not supposed to.
No, we're not, and so we have to go through the formal process. But I think if we did it a couple of times, it might get easier, and people would get used to it. And I also hesitate to say that you need to spend more time in meetings, because there have been times I really should go to a select board meeting and I'm too tired by Wednesday. So
it's a big commitment.
It is.
It is a lot of work. And I do realize how much work it is on everybody's part, on all the different committees and commissions that we have and stuff.
Yeah. Thank you, all of you.
Thank you. So
Could I just make a couple of quick statements? I know this has been a long meeting.
Yeah, go ahead.
First, I kind of take exception to the premise that's being put out that the Planning Commission was going down the wrong path when that meeting took place and the report approved by the Planning Commission was not followed. That was a minority of the Planning Commission that felt that way, and that was the solution that they chose to use to try to get around being a minority. So I won't say anything more about that.
And
the other thing is, to me, one of the bottom lines here to this discussion is the scenario where you have a 5-member select board that would then become a 4-member select board if someone had to recuse, and you could easily find yourself in a 2-2 tie. I don't think that serves the town. So otherwise, and I will say this as well, because I pride myself on being fair, Peter brings a lot of information and knowledge to the Planning Commission, and that will be missed, but I think we can get by.
Thank you, Tim.
The communication problem, by the way, was before the rogue chair said anything. That was when the bigger communication was. I would say after the rogue chair said something, you guys started paying attention, which I really appreciate.
okay, Arnie,
There might have been other ways to do it besides.
I don't think this topic has been warned. I think what we're supposed to be talking about is the conflict of interest policy.
talking about it.
Not, pardon me?
We're talking about it.
No, I know, but we're now veering off to historical meetings of the planning commission and how all the commissions talk to one another and communicate. And that doesn't really have to do with the conflict of interest policy.
It's a little bit related because it's all part of a backstory of what's going on right now with the issue that we're talking about. But it's going to come down to Peter. You have to make up your mind. And
I told you that I was going to give Julie, Julie my resignation from the planning commission. I said that at the beginning of this.
All right, thank you.
I said that 20 minutes ago.
Thanks, Peter. Appreciate it.
Just grading on you. I had to give you your 20 minutes to air so you felt better.
That's okay.
Can we move on now? Are we done with this?
No, not yet. I'll make that decision.
Okay, I'm fine.
Sean?
My name came up a little while ago, and
what's your name, sir?
And I'm not going to comment on minutes because I don't get a say in correcting them. But I will say, if you want to go to the November 9th, 2016 edition of the Telegraph, you'll find an article about this.
What was that date again?
November 9th, 2016.
Thank you.
I got to remember what I said. I have trouble with last week. I'm going to have to definitely look it up. Thank you, Sean. Next item on our agenda is our annual appointments. Let me find my list. So every year, we go through a list of annual appointments. And basically, I'll just read down the list instead of doing each one individually.
Would you read mine?
Is this one?
Read mine, because there's a couple additions. There's a change.
Peter Hutkins? You're going for the Transportation Advisory Committee?
They're actually in trouble because I used to work for him as a contractor, and believe it or not, I used to be a bonded contractor for him, so this
I'm
might be
serious.
fun.
You want to do that?
Yeah.
Great, thank you. I've been doing it for about 6 or 8 years, and it's a lot of work, and there's a lot going on with it too, and it's a lot of interesting work too. And I'm hoping maybe we can get Kirby to be the alternate on that case.
He might be. The problem that, we probably could get him. The problem that Kirby ran into because he served as the Transportation Advisory Committee last year, he has young children. So
Okay.
An
All right.
evening meeting during the week was causing a lot of problems for him.
Right.
It's the problem.
I have no problem communicating with Kirby.
So when we go down the list, would you be I'll be the alternate, and you could be the number one man there?
Yeah, it was open, and I know that Kirby was busy, and it actually is, I have a lot of years in bridges and stuff. It's just not any fun to build anymore.
Okay.
Fixing old stuff is no fun, but when you blow an interstate through a mountain, it's really a good time.
I don't know if they've done that often like that, but
Yeah,
there's some
we
interesting
have, yeah.
conversations I've had for sure.
No, that's all we're
I
doing.
mean, and I've
It's
been
safety.
going to most of the meetings for the last, I don't know how many years, because
Yeah.
Kirby has been, well, I guess
We're going,
because
they're
of kids
going,
and stuff.
the safety and the shoulders and the intersection, and we're not, the big construction is kind
Electric
of done.
vehicles, bicycles,
Right.
walking paths, and all
Yep.
that. All right, let me,
Sidewalks.
this is the good list?
Yes, that's
What
the
time
list.
is it? It's after
I know,
9.
just do the appointments, please. I'm getting snarky.
I'm getting hell from everybody.
Julie is really tired.
Animal Control Officer for 1 year, the police chief, cemetery sexton, Ed Rushford. And Senior Solutions, Linda Stoll, 1 year. Emergency manager, the town manager, fence viewer, Frank Balsh. Jack Cable, Derek Surso. First constable, Jeff Holden. Green Update Chairman, Frank Kelly. Inspector of Lumber, Shingles and Wood, Derek Surso. Pound Keeper, Police Chief. RPC Alternate, Julie Hance. Our Road Commissioner. What am I can't follow the line across. Road Commissioner, Town Manager. Secretary to Selectmen, Susan Bailey. Board of Wastewater Disposal, the Select Board, Solid Waste District Rep, Derek Surso. No alternate on that. Town Service Officer, the Town Manager. Transportation Advisory Council, Peter Hutkins. Transportation Advisory Council alternate, Arnie Janinas. Tree Ward, Ariana Knapp. Excellent. Joe Epler, I think he's moved out of town.
Yeah, he's out of
gone
town.
and stuff.
Yeah, he's moved.
Water Commissioners, Board of Selectmen, Weir of Coal. Fossil fuel.
I'd like that one.
Yeah.
Sorry.
That's a real Derek Sursa. So
That's it.
that's
We need a motion?
Our annual appointments, yeah.
I'll make a motion to accept the 2023 appointment list as read.
And I'll second that.
So Lee's the motion and Heather's the second. Any discussion on it? I only had a comment about Ariana stepping up to be the tree warden, and you think you've done some research on this, and it's actually a little more involved than I always thought too, when I was looking at it regarding trees, shrubs, anything that has to do with stuff growing on town property, basically.
And just so you know, I've already signed up for a workshop at the Nature Museum in Grafton on incoming tree blight bugs. So there's a whole,
Emerald ash borer.
So you and I
more.
will chat because we've done an inventory in our town.
and I want all of it.
Yeah.
Can't wait.
And plus, the town also did a canopy study a couple
Yes,
of
we
years
also have a
back
tree management
that has
plan.
all
I
the
want all of
trees.
it. I'll read all of it. Thank you.
And that one has ideas for future plantings in it, too.
Which is why I now need to come to the Planning Commission.
Not as exciting as that, but yeah.
Any other further discussion on the list? All those in favor of approving the list as read, please say aye.
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 Anybody opposed? We doing paper of record next time?
We're doing paper of record next time,
Okay.
Planning Commission DRB appointments, appointment of your town clerk treasurer. That's all happening the next time. Because I had to advertise. Technically, I have to advertise.
The Whiting Library trustee appointment. Oh, there it is. So Matt Gorski, who is the new chairman of the Library Board of Trustees, they have an open position, and they were asking if Chris Burke could be appointed to that position. That's open right now, and they need the
So moved.
approval to do that. Heather, you made the motion?
Yes, sir.
Second.
I didn't get a chance to finish saying it, but thank you.
Seconded?
Sorry.
Seconded. Any discussion on this?
Yeah, he was on the ballot. It's just that there was an open position and the ballots weren't correct. So he was actually voted, just didn't have enough votes for that particular one, but it fills the board. So I am more than in favor of it.
Great. It's good to see people step up and become part of the community and help out in whatever ways they can. All those in favor of appointing Matt Gorski to, how long, do you know the
No.
term on it?
No, Chris Burke.
Oh,
Chris Burke.
yeah, Chris Burke.
See, it's late.
In there.
He's only appointed to the next election.
Okay.
Yeah, because it's an elected position.
To fill out all those in favor of appointing Chris Burke to the Library Trustees Board, please say aye.
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 Anybody opposed? Liquor licenses. So, Dollar General, second class in tobacco. Smitty's Chester Market, second class. Heritage Deli, first class in outside consumption. American Legion, first class, third class in outside consumption. Mediterranean Wine and Cheese, second class. Pizza Stone, first class, third class in outside consumption. Fullerton Inn, first class, third class in outside consumption. We don't have any motions no more on this.
You
This
don't,
is
no,
just
no, now
information.
you do make a motion.
Oh, because it's through the
Because you
computer.
don't sign them anymore.
So I'll make a motion to accept these liquor licenses as discussed.
Is there a second?
Second.
Ariana, Lee's the motion, Ariana's the second. Any discussion on this? I mean, it's pretty straightforward. There's no
Straightforward, police
issues.
chief, no, police chief looked at the
Actually, I have
file.
one question. Are any of these first-time applicants or first-time licenses?
No, these are all
Thank you.
renewals. Yep.
All those in favor of the list and the motion as stated, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Entertainment permits, Pizza Stone, Heritage Deli and Bakery, American Legion, and the Fullerton Inn.
These you signed, so you don't need a motion.
And everybody's okay with the days of the week and the times
Yes.
and everything
Yep,
else like
and no
that?
complaints, so the chiefs did not have any issues.
These are also renewals?
These are all renewals, nothing new.
Sorry. Keep reading, that's all. I'm losing it. In here? I will. You only need three signatures, so it doesn't matter.
You're good.
Oh, you're all set at the end with the signatures? Future agenda items and new business.
So I have a question about the memorandum of understanding. Are we talking about that next meeting
For the garden.
for the community garden? Or we just?
We can, you didn't, you weren't, you guys
we were
had
just
said
gonna
you
leave
weren't
it up to-
approving it. You-
Okay, that's fine. I just was curious. I got it, looked at it, had a question, but I'll ask you afterwards.
Okay, yeah, you had asked to see a copy, but you had said
Right,
for
right.
us to just sign it.
Yep.
I mean, if anybody has any questions or
concern,
issues
I
with
would
it,
like- yeah.
then let us know. I mean,
Yeah.
let the board know, and we can talk about it, but
Yeah.
I think it's pretty straightforward
Yeah,
at this
I
point.
thought so. Yeah.
I'd like to add for a future agenda item, the composition of the Cannabis Commission, the local Cannabis Commission.
Okay.
Actually, I think I've already got that on my list, but I will.
Well, there's quite a bit on there, paper of record, the appointments.
Yeah, your next
solar
meeting will
field.
be, but they're all fairly straightforward. Paper record, PRC, PC and DRB interviews and appointments. Hopefully Lee and I will have a solar field update sometime in this century. VTrans, the standard financial plan that you guys sign every year, and then the local emergency management plan, and then the local cannabis control.
Do you want me to send you that stuff on the trains?
Yes, please.
Okay.
Yep. And then in May, there is the planning commission did a bylaw amendment that will be coming to you guys May 3rd. And then we'll have a financial update on May 3rd.
Julie, based on the citizen comment at the beginning of this meeting, does it make sense, does our emergency planning guidelines that you just referenced briefly include rail safety, rail emergencies? Should we?
So the local emergency management plan is more, what it addresses is who the players are if there is an emergency in our town. But that plan also identifies what we have as hazards in our town, and our rail system is identified within that plan as a hazard.
Great. That answers my question.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Anybody else have anything they would like on future agendas? Hearing none, I would entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Yep, second.
Second.
Lee's the motion and Peter's the second. All in favor of adjourning, please say aye.
Aye. Aye, even though I don't have a vote. I said aye. Recording.